Wow, this is funny. I saw the title and I just had to watch. They care more about pronouns than human life. And this is by Tucker Carlson, Fox News. People that were, you know, uh, telling their viewers and stuff that, you have to sacrifice grandma and other family members during COVID and so that, the nation can still function and that you can still go to work.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. If there's one thing your average liberal understands perfectly well, it's that there's safety in numbers. Don't go out alone. Bring 80 million people with you. It's safer that way.
Wow, that's funny. Yeah, it's safer in numbers, which everybody knows, that's the truth. There's safety in numbers. That's why uh, people like to go out in groups. That's why there are various herd animals. That's why, that's just the thing about, that's just a fact, yeah. It, when there's a larger group of people, you're more likely to be safer because, people don't want to, do something crazy or illegal in a group of people.
There is a reason, a fundamental reason, the Democrats are natural joiners and organizers and petition signers, and that their highest virtue is conformity.
Well, yeah, and this is not something the right does, go out and protest, go out in groups of people in order to air their grievances, form political parties and stuff like that. No, right-wingers don't do that whatsoever.
They know that as long as they're all wearing the same uniform, they'll probably be okay. This is why you'll see one person in Brookline or Bethesda raise a Ukrainian flag in the yard, and the very next day, everybody on the street will have one too.
Wow, that's hilarious. Yeah, that's why you see people who support a cause show that they're supporting a cause with various memorabilia and stuff. That's not something the right wing doesn't. That's not something the right wing does. They didn't, fly, White Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter flags during 2020.
Suddenly, it's an entire neighborhood of foreign policy experts all specializing in Eastern European border disputes. It's amazing. Just last year, these very same people were all eminent virologists, every one of them with passionate views on the details of pandemic management.
Oh God, this is just hilarious. Okay, so now he's mad that people were supporting various policies during the pandemic. Like, he is all over the place already. First it's Black Lives Matter, then it's Ukraine, now it's COVID.
This is, in other words, not a movement of rugged individuals. This is a party based on the idea of the group, the bureaucracy, the blob. It's the party of weak, fearful people who are huddled together for collective power.
Well, this is hilarious because he's talking about the right wing right here, and it's a projection to the extreme, and I love it.
When the Democratic Party speaks, it is always with one voice, often in a North Korean accent. One thing.
Wow, the Democratic Party speaks in one voice, and it's often in the the Korean accent. It's like, where did that even come from? But I guess, at the moment, Tucker and Fox News wants people to be hateful towards Korea.
Thing the party often speaks about is gun control. No American has the right to own an effective firearm, a firearm that does what firearms are supposed to. They'll tell you this at length.
Well, no, they're not saying that people shouldn't be allowed to own firearms. People on the left are saying that we should have sensible gun laws to prevent the wrong people from having guns so that they can go around and, commit mass murder. It's funny how this is supposed to be how the left doesn't care about human life when it's the right that doesn't care. They don't care how many kids die in school shootings as long as, nobody takes away any gun whatsoever, which is not happening. which is, you tell them, there are kids starving on the streets. They don't care. You tell them, kids are being mass murdered by, people with mental illnesses. They don't care. You like, hey, can we have stricter gun laws? No. Can we have better mental health care facilities so that these people can get the mental health treatment that they need? They're like, no, we don't care.
Having a gun like that is just too much autonomy for you. If it continues, you may start to believe that you're a free citizen. And we can't allow that, and we won't. Joe Biden, for instance, makes this point regularly. Watch.
We're living in a country awash in weapons of war. I got it done once. I'm going to do it again. Eliminate assault weapons. It's time to ban these. It's time to ban these weapons. The right to bear arms is not an absolute right that dominates all others. You don't need an AR-15. I'm serious. Think about it. Ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines.
You don't need an RA-15 or whatever they call it.
Okay. Point there. Though, you tell right-wingers, hey, people are using AR-15s to shoot up schools. Should we have reasonable gun laws to prevent, the wrong people from getting these? They will definitely just tell you no, that everybody should be allowed to have one. They don't care that kids are dying in schools. Like at Uvalde, where a person used an AR, and the cops were so afraid of being killed by the AR that they just let a bunch of kids die.
So that's the head of the Democratic Party speaking very clearly that the party's position on guns. If we don't control them, you can't have them. Every Democrat thinks this as part of the catechism. So you can imagine our surprise. The other day, we're driving through Cambridge in the old hybrid Subaru, adjusting our surgical masks to cover both nose and mouth, and listening, needless to say, to National Public Radio, the voice of menopausal liberalism. And as we're listening, we hear this. We're going to play it for you and see if you can understand our total shock.
Menopausal liberalism, like, he had to get in some kind of jab at women that are going through menopause, like something that all women go through, and it's like, what was the point in that? But I guess, Tucker Carlson has to show how much he hates women.
Mass shootings targeting LGBTQ spaces and a rise in anti-trans rhetoric have inspired some queer people to take up arms. New Hampshire's public radio Todd Bookman joined a monthly gathering of a gun group that sees firearms as key to their own self-defense. And as you might imagine, this story does include the sound of gunfire.
On a recent Sunday morning, the parking lot of Pawtuckaway State Park in southeastern New Hampshire is filling up with hikers. There's also a different crew, packing up warm clothes and weapons.
Thank you all for coming to Rainbow Reload.
Your anti-trans rhetoric makes the trans community carry guns. Rainbow!
Well, that's funny. Now he's going to argue how some people having guns is bad because it's the trans community. That's hilarious. And that's how the right wing is. Guns are good when it's for a certain group of people, those looking to commit genocide against others.
Oh, reload! They're packing heat. They'll be appendix carrying in more ways than one. Watch out. Wait a second, we thought. This is NPR, National Public Radio, suddenly telling you that actually guns are good. They're valuable tools of self-defense, really against you.
No, nobody says that all guns are bad. They're saying that a certain group of guns that are used in mass shootings are bad and should be regulated. The clips that he showed was Biden talking about having stricter laws on AR guns, not handguns or anything else.
So there are times when guns are good, says NPR. And we thought, well, wait a second. We've been listening to NPR since, well, Click and Clack, the Tappet brothers. And we remember very clearly their position on guns. For example, quote, the U.S. has more guns than any other country in the world. This is the same NPR that, in between updates on the latest trans dinosaur emojis, we've been following those very carefully, routinely runs segments calling for more gun control, and not subtle ones, like the segment entitled, "Many gun owners support gun control, so why don't they speak out?" Oh yeah, a lot of gun owners support gun control. Of course.
Well, yeah, the sensible, logical gun owners do support gun control because it's about keeping everybody safe and not the fantasy of taking on the government and everybody you hate and committing a genocide.
Of course they do. And yet here's that same National Public Radio, state media, controlled by the Biden administration, encouraging people to go to the gun store immediately. But not all people, just trans people. Guns are bad, except in the hands of trans people.
Again, that's hilarious because nobody said all guns are bad. But Tucker Carlson wants to prime his audience into thinking that the left thinks that all guns are bad, when now you have a large group of left-wing people that are like, yeah, I love guns. It's part of the Second Amendment.
Wow. Here's more.
Groups like Rainbow Reload exist around the country, often called Pink Pistol Clubs. It's a place for experts and the gun curious to practice and improve their shooting. But this goes beyond hobby. There's a practical goal here, to prepare and protect themselves.
Which is the same thing that the right wing is doing. A good number of them, yeah, they practice gun use for protection. But since trans people are doing it, Tucker Carlson is acting like the advocation for gun rights is bad. This is like when the Black Panther was carrying guns and patrolling their neighborhoods against corrupt cops. Right-wingers started calling for actual gun laws. Republicans were the first people to pass a gun regulation bill under Ronald Reagan.
If the world is dangerous, then you have to be dangerous back. And that very much has pushed me into where I am now.
Which is the same belief that right-wingers have. Oh, the world is dangerous. I need to get guns to protect myself from, quote-unquote, corrupt government, and so on and so on.
Ooh, the gun curious. Well, when NPR describes something as the fill-in-the-blank curious, then it's a good thing. Oh, the pedophile curious. Now the gun curious. The world is dangerous. You have to be dangerous back. Now, is that a quote from an FBI indictment of the Proud Boys? No, it's from an NPR segment.
He had to bring in the Proud Boys like, hey guys, these people hate the Proud Boys. The Proud Boys are good. Blah, blah, blah.
At this point, it's hard to tell the difference. And the lip-smacking NPR reporters just say it without any sense of self-awareness at all. What is going on here? Well, you know what's going on here. Is that NPR has decided that guns are bad except when the enforcers of its ideology have guns. You can't have guns, but faithful servants of the Democratic Party can. And that makes sense because, like all totalitarians, they want a monopoly on force.
Hey guys, be afraid. The government's trying to get a monopoly on force when that's not even the case. And again, this entire segment is hilarious. It's just a bunch of fear-mongering. Telling his right-wing audience, hey, Democrats are using guns and are trying to take your guns. Be afraid. You gotta fight back. Use some violence.
Right? So debate ends at that point. When one side has all the firearms, you don't have to argue. You say, well, you can't change your sex. Shut up, bigot! Bang, bang!
Right, because trans people are looking to kill people on the right the moment they say they can't have their sex change, while right-wingers are doing everything they can to erase the existence of trans people.
What's interesting is this is not just one NPR segment. The social justice reporter from NPR station KNPR KX in Seattle. A reporter called Lily Anna Fowler just reported on a fascinating story. It's the suicide of a self-described trans person called Ucy. In case you want to look it up, it's EUCY. Here's how that NPR reporter described the suicide of Ucy. Quote, spoke to Rachel, a friend of Ucy, the Ballard resident who died by suicide yesterday while being evicted by King County Sheriff's deputies. Rachel says her friend had tried to get help in paying rent, but exhausted all options. Well, that sounds...
She was getting evicted, exhausted all options and paying rent, and knew she wasn't going to be able to, get housing or, get into shelter. So what, they decided to end their life so that they wouldn't have to deal with, the suffering of being homeless. That happens with a lot of people.
Awful. So here's a person who's fallen on hard times like so many Americans, is getting bounced out of her apartment and kills herself out of desperation.
This is an argument for universal housing. Everybody should be able to be given a house so that they have a permanent place to live. It is atrocious how we have like 5 times as many empty, unused buildings in America compared to like the number of homeless people, and it's a housing first policy is the only way of doing away with dealing with homelessness and people going without housing. Give people a house. They can then pay a mortgage to the government, and boom, there's no fear of eviction or losing your house, because your taxes will be your mortgage, and that will pay for your house, and everybody can get a house. When we have so much land and so many houses, it's wild to think that people are still going homeless when there's enough shelter for these people.
And anyone hearing or reading that dispatch from NPR reporter Lily Anna Fowler would feel pretty bad for the person who killed him or herself. Politics aside, completely. But it turns out NPR didn't tell the entire story. What NPR left out was that Ucy had shot a sheriff's deputy prior to killing himself. In fact, Ucy put that sheriff's deputy in the hospital where he remains tonight after undergoing emergency surgery.
Why don't you show any excerpt from that happening like you did previously?
That wasn't of any interest whatsoever to NPR's social justice team. They just didn't care. What they wanted you to know was that Ucy was part of the trans community and Ucy died. And so Ucy's life matters much more than anyone's, including the cop he shot, and certainly more than yours. So what underlies all of this? It's not about trans rights, of course. Do you really think Joe Biden and his faithful vice president care about trans rights? Not one bit.
And it's not like you care about trans rights whatsoever. All you care about is how much money you can make peddling hate towards your audience.
About as much as they care about the daily suffering in Selma, Alabama. Not at all. Selma, Alabama is a desperate place. Poverty and violence define it. But they show up once a year to relive the civil rights movement, and then they leave.
Do you even care about poverty, Mr. Heir to the Swanson fortune?
That's how much they care. And that's precisely how much they care about the trans community. The trans community, of course, is a vehicle for something else, and it's always the same thing, which is political power. And political power made possible by political violence.
This is how they talked about gay people when they wanted the right to marry. And this isn't about people wanting the right to marry. This is just about political power.
They want to be able to commit it, and they want you defenseless so you can't fight back. A lot of people in this country want it, not just NPR listeners. When police were holding a press conference about the shooting, again, the shooting of a police officer by a trans-identifying individual called Ucy, activists heckled the police spokeswoman.
And this is also hilarious because he's talking about somebody fighting the cops, if that did happen, while also supporting January 6th and people fighting cops. When it's right-wingers fighting cops, it's just peaceful tourism. But when it's trans people supposedly fighting cops, that's some big sin against the United States.
As the cop was in the hospital undergoing emergency surgery. Why? Because they said the spokeswoman misgendered the shooter. Watch this.
We've been led to believe that your 29-year-old man is actually a transgender person. Is there any truth to that?
I have no idea.
I actually knew the person. They are trans, and I asked that they don't be dead named. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously this country has reached peak frivolity. The officer is in the hospital fighting for his life, but the debate is whether we're dead naming someone who shot him. So the people in that...
It's funny how he still hasn't given any evidence that the person actually shot the cop. He just wants you to believe that the person shot the cop and that the person is trans.
Frame, and a lot of people, actually, who listen to NPR care more about pronouns than human life. NPR would...
Well, and this is by right-wingers who don't care about kids that are starving, don't care about kids that are being shot in mass murders, don't care about kids that are going homeless, don't care about kids that don't have, good enough medical insurance to get the, proper medications they need so they don't die. Yeah, but, it's supposed to be the left that doesn't care, but it's actually the right wing that doesn't care.
Rather, you didn't know any of this. We only know that this actually happened because reporters like Jason Rantz and Andy Ngo, one like NPR, don't take any money from taxpayers, were paying attention and knew the details. And by the way, Andy Ngo has run the numbers about these claims of violence and genocide against the trans community. And here's what he found, having done actual research into it. Quote, there is no genocide of trans people in the U.S. or anywhere in the West. In fact, there's been an explosion of trans-identifying people, which research suggests is a social contagion.
A social contagion. This is how Nazis talked about people. It's a social contagion. People are being infected with transgenderism, and they're going to soon change their rhetoric from, yeah, it's the social contagion, and we have to eradicate this transgender virus from our community, meaning they want to, kill transgender people.
Spread by social media fads and youth peer pressure. The few dozen trans people tragically killed in America each year are usually murdered by black men in the course of prostitution activities.
Which, okay, yeah, where's the evidence of that? Transgender people are more likely to be killed by right-wing Christian men.
So we believe that that is factually true. None of that ever gets mentioned, of course.
We believe that to be factually true, yet you don't provide any evidence that it's fact.
Of course, least of all on National Public Radio. What does get mentioned? Well, the neo-Nazis, of course, they're the real threat. They're the ones targeting Rainbow Reload militia. Watch that.
Yeah, Nazis are a big threat. Oh, it's funny how he's now defending Nazis. If you didn't think Tucker Carlson was a Nazi, well, here you go. He's going to defend Nazis. Right-wing Nazis have been the one targeting trans people for quite a while now. They're even attacking the power grid in order to prevent drag shows from happening. Yes, Nazis are quite evil.
This.
One of the members, Sharon, recently transitioned.
And I went from concealed carry every once in a while when I was sort of feeling it to every single day, because reading the news, having a few experiences, realizing that I've gone from old cis male white upper middle class, really no real fears about anything, to there are people that just looking at me will want to hurt me.
There's that individual fear of what may happen simply existing in public. But for some, there's also a more organized and ominous threat, including a neo-Nazi group now active in New England that's targeted trans people.
Okay, wow. So somebody is being targeted by a Nazi group, and they decided to carry more often, and somehow that's bad because, oh yeah, it's because they're trans.
The neo-Nazi group active in New England. The least right-wing region in America. Every state is blue, but there's a neo-Nazi group that's terrifying everybody. Look.
Every state is blue? No, nobody has ever said every state is blue. We obviously know there are blue states, red states, and purple states. And yeah, there can be Nazi groups up in the north. That has happened many times. Oh God. Tucker Carlson acts like he's like some intelligent person, but like, well, he may be pretending to do a character here and pretending to be stupid, but I don't know, sometimes it's hard to believe that this dude is actually intelligent.
Just to be clear, we're not against people, American citizens, carrying firearms, having firearms. We support it, including trans people. It's fine.
Oh, really? Do you truly support trans people carrying guns? Because this entire segment seems like you're totally against it.
But what you're watching here is not the exercise of the Second Amendment. What you're watching here is political hysteria, fear, ginned up on purpose with maximum dishonesty in order to get people in a state of agitation, armed people in a state of agitation. Doesn't matter if they're trans or not.
No, he doesn't like people being armed. Ooh, so is he saying he's against the Second Amendment?
Not, whatever that is. It's the same template always. Scare the crap out of your voters, tell them that their lives are at risk, encourage them to get guns. How do you think that ends?
That's what the right wing does all the time. That's what you do all the time. You fearmonger your audience into buying guns. That's why you always claim, like, you know, people are trying to take your guns. And then you tell people are after your lives. And then we have mass shootings by the right wing. This is hilarious.
But by the way, if we're following the logic here, and why not? That's in short supply in this country. You have to kind of wonder, like, what's the limit to this? So if trans people are in fear for their lives in every region in the country, including New England, which apparently is crawling with Nazis now, why wouldn't we be arming them as we are, say, Ukraine's trans army? And there are famously trans people in Ukraine's army. They're very, very proud of that.
Great point there, Tucker. Yeah, let's arm every single trans person with the maximum amount of guns possible. I'm down for that.
So why stop with AR-15s? I mean, why not F-35s or tanks? You know, that's a question for our highest-ranking trans admiral, Richard Levine. Here is Richard Levine in July of 2020 describing the threat.
The most vulnerable among us continue to suffer, including LGBTQ individuals of color, LGBTQ youth, LGBTQ seniors, and LGBTQ immigrants.
So none of that is factually true, as we...
No, that is factually true. Yeah, trans people are targeted. People in the LGBTQ community are still highly targeted. And it's funny how Tucker Carlson claims to be all about the facts and what is factual when all he's doing is lying most of the time.
We just told you, in fact, some of the people he's describing are not the most oppressed in our society, but literally and measurably the most entitled and privileged.
No, they're not. Not when you have, like, almost half the nation passing laws against these people.
The Biden administration hired a kid to oversee nuclear waste disposal whose only qualification was his sexual fetishes. So no.
Right, that's another lie.
There's not genocide going on. There's some weird affirmative action program going on.
Wow, yeah, some weird affirmative action program going on. Okay, yeah, this is close to the end of the clip, so he has to bring up affirmative action. Yeah, because that's a bad thing.
But if you listen to NPR, you wouldn't know that. And that kind of talk might scare the heck out of you. And if they encourage you to go get a gun and arm yourself because Nazis are taking over Vermont.
Well, if you're a right-winger and if you feel fear, then you are not a true man, because men don't feel fear, because men don't feel anything.
You might do it. Again, we're as for guns as you could possibly be. But this seems like an incitement.